discuss some important design inputs with the designer, and those design inputs were your design in the form of schematic or design in the form of HDL. Along with that, you should have good knowledge about the CAD tools. Means these are two very important inputs with the designer. Apart from these two inputs, another very important input with the designer is the platform. Is the platform where designer want to implement that particular design, whatever schematic or HDL you have to implement that design on some platform, and that platform is where it plays very important role in your complete VLSI design. So in this session we are going to discuss different platforms available for your VLSI design, and depending upon these platforms, designer can easily choose one according to the availability at their end. So in this session, uh, overview of this complete session is, first of all, we are going to discuss design abstraction levels. In this we are going to discuss three different abstraction levels and their importance. After that, we are going to discuss different devices, or you can say different platforms, where we can implement our design depending upon the availability with us. And these three different platforms are PLDs, ASICs, and FPGAs. Then we will have a comparison between these different platforms, and finally we are going to conclude our session, and then references. So first of all, we are going to discuss some design abstraction levels. So here you can see that we can start our design in any one of these levels. So we can start our design from this device level also. If you can view this slide, different slide level design levels are there, and first level is device level, and this level is basically related with your layout creation. If you remember, I told you that we can make our design by using layout, or we can create our layout straight away by using Microvent. So here actually you define exact physical dimensions of your transistors and other required circuitry on your design. So again, I'm going to tell you that for if you want to work in this level, then you should have good knowledge of your lambda rules. And next step is you can input your design using schematic, and that schematic may be in the form of your transistors. You can use PMOS, NMOS transistors. Basically here we are using the CMOS technology, as our yesterday speaker he already explained you about the PMOS, NMOS, and CMOS technology. So here I am just showing you the this one. This is the CMOS technology. So first level, either you can create your own layout. Here you need to have complete specification of your device in the form of PMOS transistor, NMOS transistor, exact dimensions of sources, drain, gate, and is your this circuit level. In this circuit level, you can use your transistors, PMOS and NMOS, and you can create your design. Again, it depends upon the availability with the designer. If your circuit is available in the form of transistors, then you are going to prefer this one, this circuit level, abstraction level. You will prefer this, you can say, level to design your circuit. Next level is your gate level, or you can say that logic level abstraction level. We can create our design with the help of different gates. You have different universal gates, NAND, NOR gates are there. You can use those gates for designing your circuit. Apart from them, you can use any gate for your circuit design. So in this, again, this is basically it depends upon the availability of the circuit. If your circuit is present in the form of logic gates, then no doubt designer is going to prefer this gate level. So and the next step is your module level. Module level here means that by using these gates, we can create our own modules, and these modules may vary from very small size to large size. Small size means we can have small size modules in the form of, you can say, multiplexers. Then your adders can be there, multipliers can be there, and then your large modules can be there in the form of processors. So once these modules are there with you, you can use these modules in your design, and these modules will act as just like a black box, and you will have input and output interface of that module, and you connect these modules with the help of your either schematic diagram, and you can create netlist for that complete design. So basically, with the help of these modules, we make our design easy. So you have one complete module, and there is no need to create. For example, if I have created one multiplier and it is optimized in all sense, it is optimized in the sense of area consumption, it is optimized in sense of your power consumption, and it is optimized in speed also. Then there is no need to create that multiplier again and again. I am going to create, let us say I am starting from my this circuit level. If I am working in circuit level, I will create my own gate in this circuit level by using module, and that module may be full adder, it can be subtractor, it can be multiplexer, it can be multiplier. So by using these different transistors and then different gates, I am creating one module that is multiplier, and that module is optimized in all sense. For example, you can say that it is optimized in all three areas: area, power, and your speed. So once your multiplier is designed, optimized multiplier is designed, there is no need to design that multiplier again and again. We can save that multiplier in our own library, and whenever you need that multiplier in your design, we can just call that multiplier from that library, and then we can use that multiplier in your design. So it basically eases the design problem, and it also enhances the time to market factor. Means whenever you are dealing with some design, you are making some design, your main aim is, first of all, your design should be reliable, it should be acceptable by the takers, and then it should be means competent in all the aspects. So another important aspect is you have to come up with that design or that system in a very short time. So basically your time to market factor, it should be very small. So this module kind of approach, basically it helps you to achieve that very less time to market factor. So once you make your design in any one of these levels, device level, circuit level, gate level, or module level, then our next aim is we have to import that design to your chip. So we create chip with the help of these schematics, and once your chip is available, then your final target, you have to basically place this chip on PCB. So whenever we talk about this VLSI, we can't skip this PCB part, because PCB plays a very important, or you can say vital role in your complete VLSI design. In VLSI design, either you can create your own chip or you can program some existing chip, but whenever you have to use these chips, you need some kind of platform, and that platform is normally provided with the help of your PCB. So here we can see that PCB provides two important tasks. One is PCB gives us you can say it gives physical placement to the components, and it also provide interconnection between these different components. So whatever whether you have this programmable chip with you, whether you have chip that you have designed, but you need some platform where you have to place those chips. So PCB play a very important role in all this VLSI design. So these are different design abstraction levels. No doubt a designer is going to opt out of these levels depending upon the CAD tool also. If your CAD tool supports device level, only then you can work in device level. If your CAD tool supports this circuit level, only then you can make your design in circuit level. So basically each and everything is interconnected. So CAD tools are also very important. So that is why we have basically we divide our VLSI in two parts. One is your front end VLSI, second one is your back end VLSI design. When we talk about this front end VLSI design, then we say that we have one chip in our hand. That chip is basically programmable, and you have to program that chip. So front end VLSI design is basically you have something in your hand, and you have to program that particular chip based on your application. And when we say backend VLSI design, backend VLSI design means you are going to create your own chip. So if we differentiate this front end VLSI design, back end VLSI design, and then PCB design, just for example, if you take one example of full adder, if I want to make that full adder on my PCB, then I need different components. I need different ICs, and for making, you can say, decade counter. If you want to create decade counter, then you need 74 series IC, 7490 IC you need, that is one decade counter IC. Then you need 7 segment display, then you need decoder drive. That decoder drive may be your 7448, or it may be your 7447. So if I want to create that decade counter on PCB, then I need some already existing components in the market, and those already existing components in the market are your these different 74 series ICs. So next thing, if I want to use backend VLSI design, and I want to create again one full adder using this backend VLSI design, in that case what I have to do, I'm going to create that full adder, or you can say decade, that decade count chip itself. So we are going to create our own chip for that decade counter. Every component will be present on your silicon itself. So you are going to create your own chip. And if we talk about this front end VLSI, this design, front end VLSI design means you have one programmable chip with you. You have some resources on that particular chip, and you have to use those resources, and you have to program your that chip in such a way that that chip will work as your decade counter. So these three different platforms are there, and you can distinguish them, and depending upon the CAD tools, depending upon the you can say devices or platforms with you, you can choose one of these platforms. So design abstraction levels, we can divide design abstraction levels in three parts, and I think we have already discussed these things in our earlier talk. These three design abstraction levels are your behavioral domain, second one is your structural domain, and third one is your physical domain. So whenever we proceed with our design, we work in either one of these domains. Either we work in behavioral domain. Here behavioral domain means we are going to create our own code. As I told you, either we can create our design with the help of some code, that is your HDL. Either you can go ahead with your VHDL design, or you can go ahead with your Verilog design, right? So whenever we are writing any program or code, it means that we are working in this behavioral domain. So we are going to create some program, and that program can have subroutines, it can have some instructions. So this is one important domain where a designer can work, depending upon the no doubt your comfortability with your design part. If you are more comfortable with programming part, then no doubt you are going to opt for this behavioral domain. And another important advantage of this behavioral domain is, as I told you, that whenever we work in behavioral, modification is easy because it is textural language. In textural language, you can easily modify the design. But the drawback of this behavioral domain is it is not easy to understand. Means if you have any code, it is not very easy to understand that particular code. It is difficult. But advantage, no doubt, advantage is there. You can easily modify your code whenever you want as per your requirement. Then second is your structural domain. Structural domain, again, this is your domain where you input your design in the form of schematic, and that schematic can be either transistors, or it can be in the form of your gates. Again, advantage of this structural domain, if you are working in the structural domain, advantage is that it is means you can designer can easily understand the design if it is in the form of schematic, or you can say in the form of transistors and gates. And disadvantage of this structural domain is basically you can say modification is difficult. So this is whatever advantage is there of your behavioral domain, that is basically disadvantage of another. So these two domains are basically can be differentiated in this manner. And apart from these two domains, one is behavioral, another is structural. The third domain is your physical domain. So whenever we work in a front-end VLSI design and your this back-end VLSI design, you have to either work uh, in behavioral domain or you have to work in structural domain. So these two domains support both the you can say VLSI design levels, front end and back end. And if we talk about this physical domain means now you are going to create your own layout. Basically, you are dealing with exact physical dimensions of your design. So this third domain basically it is possible, means working in this domain is possible only if you are working in your backend VLSI design tools. So if we link this complete abstraction level with our CAD tools, we can say that our CAD tools who are supporting our front-end VLSI design, in those cases we can work in either behavioral domain, we can work in structural domain. But if we are having a CAD tool for our backend VLSI design, then we can work in any one of these domains. We have the option in our software whether we want to work in behavioral domain, or we want to work in structural domain, or we want to work in physical domain. So in this way you can select your different domain depending upon the CAD tools available with you. Now we are going to discuss various devices available for our VLSI design. And before going into your design implementation, you should have very good knowledge about the input with you. So basically this is the designer input. So from here we can say that important input with the designer you can say is, first you should have circuit, or you should have design, and you should be able to understand that circuit, whether that circuit is in the form of schematic or whether it is in the form of HDL. Once that circuit is there with you, then you have to check out your CAD tools, so whether your CAD tool is going to support input of that circuit. If it is in the transistor form, whether your CAD tool can capture a circuit in the form of transistor, or if it is in the form of HDL, whether your CAD tool is capable of capturing the design in the form of HDL. So once these clear, and if your CAD tool it is supporting your design, then next part is you have to find out what hardware platform is available with you. Whether you want to design your circuit on you can say programmable chip, or you want to implement your circuit, or you want to create ASIC. So depending upon this, we can divide our these devices in three major these three major categories are your PLDs, ASICs, and FPGAs. And I think all of you are very well aware of these three different platforms. Here PLD stand for your are basically for your application specific integrated circuits. Then your FPGAs are for field programmable gate arrays. So these three very you can say important platforms are available for your VLSI design. Uh, Whatever platform is available with you, you have to find out the possibility, and accordingly you have to go ahead with your design depending upon your case. So we are going to discuss our platforms in detail now. First of all, we are starting with this PLD. PID can be further divided in two categories, and these two categories are SPID and your CPID. Here, SPID stands for your simple programmable logic devices, and CPID stands for your complex programmable logic devices. So, if you just view at this one, here you can see that this block is basically what this is your SPID block, and these are different interconnects. And in this case, because its name suggests PLD is basically your programmable logic device. Programmable logic device means it can be programmed according to your own logics. Means it can be reprogrammed. So that is why these interconnects are your programmable interconnects. So yesterday we had one talk from our expert on these interconnects. So interconnects can be programmable, or these can be completely freezed interconnects. So here, in case of your PIDs, these interconnects are normally programmable interconnects. So with the help of these SPLDs, some logic will be there in these SPIDs, means inbuilt logic will be there, some gates, some modules, these kind of things will be there in this SPID. And no doubt these SPIDs are going to vary from one vendor to another vendor, and these are also going to vary from you can say one SPID device to another SPID device. So actually in 1984, Altera introduced first CPLD based on combination of CMOS and EEPROM. Here, CMOS is basically the to create your SPLD blocks, and your EEPROM is the technology that is used to provide you the programmable interconnect. So here it is quite obvious from the this technology EEPROM, that is erasable programmable read-only memory. So it means that we can program our CPLD anytime whenever it is required. So CMOS, yesterday our expert told us that why it is power efficient. So CMOS allowed low power and high density, while your EEPROM enable these devices to be used for development and prototyping. For development and here prototyping means EEPROM means one CPID. It can be used for a number of applications. So if you are creating some circuit for the first time, and it is just like breadboard. Whenever we make our circuit, and before implementing our circuit on PCB, first of all we check our circuit on breadboard. We use components on the breadboard, we make connections between them, and then we check the functionality of our circuit. Once that circuit is working as per our requirement on that breadboard, then our next step is we move towards that particular design on PCB. Just like that, we use these programmable devices as prototype. Prototype means here whenever we develop some first time and we want to check the functionality of that system, then we need some kind of platform where we can check whether the design circuit is working as per our requirement or it is not working as per our logic. So here the most important task of CPLD is prototyping. A generic, you can say that CPLD, it consists of number of SPLD blocks, and these SPLD blocks are connected with each other with the help of these programmable interconnects. So both SPLDs and the interconnects can be programmed. Basically, you can say that in SPLD you have dedicated logics. These logics may be in the form of gate modules, and you can make interconnection inside this SPLD. Means the programmable interconnects will be there inside the SPLD, and you can connect one SPLD with another SPLD with the help of external interconnects. So here you can see that this is your SPLD. You can program different logic present inside this SPLD with the help of programmable interconnects. Apart from this one, you have these different programmable interconnects, and these programmable interconnects can be used to connect one SPLD with another. So here you can see that this is the cross section. This is basically zoomed view of this part, and here you can see that we are further zooming this portion. This portion you can say that large number of programmable interconnects and small number of programmable interconnects are going inside the this SPLD. So in between that you have one you can say programmable multiplexer. Programmable multiplexer is there. For example, let us say there are 100 wires in your external channel, programmable channel, and there are only 30 wires. Those are going inside the SPLD, and you have to select one wire from your external channel and one from your this internal channel that is going inside the SPLD. Then you have to use multiplexer. For example, I want to make a connection between wire number 67 of external channel with wire number 12 of your internal channel. Then you have to use multiplexer. So multiplexer plays a very important role. It makes interconnection with external channels, and so in this way we complete our circuit. So from here you can see that interconnection matrix usually has more wires than individual SPLD blocks, and therefore a mux is used to connect them. So mux is used. This is the function of mux inside. So if we this is the basic idea about your PLD. So two type of PLDs are available. SPLD is there, that is for your simple kind of logic. Then by using number of SPLDs we can make CPLD, and that is suitable for your complex logic. You can make some complex logics also. Then we are shifting to our another platform, and that platform is your ASICs. Here ASICs stands for your application specific integrated circuits, and ASICs are further divided into four major categories. So here you can see that those four major categories are first one is your fully custom ASICs, second gate arrays, third standard cell devices, and fourth is your structured ASICs. So now we are going to discuss these four different categories of ASICs, and what is their basically internal architecture and how they work in actual environment. So fully custom ASIC means designer has the full flexibility, means nothing is there in your hand, or we can say that nothing is there with the designer, and you have to start from the scratch. You have to create each and everything on your own. For example, if we link this thing with our design abstraction levels and different levels, so we can say that we are going to start at our device level. We are going to create our own transistors. Even transistors are not in the in our head. We will create our own transistors, and from those transistors you are going to make your gates, and then you can create your modules, and then you can come up with some design. So fully custom is nothing is in the hand of designer. You have to create each and everything. So we can say you are going to create your own transistors, you are going to create your own gates, and then you are even going to create your own interconnects, or you can say your wires, and those wires will be used to connect your gates and transistors. And these type of you can say ASICs, they are optimized in all sense. They are optimized in speed, area, and power. Means each and everything will be defined by the designer self, and nothing is predefined. Example of this fully custom ASIC is your microprocessor, and the drawback of this fully custom ASIC is it is time consuming, because you are going to create each and everything from the scratch, and it is going to be time consuming. This is the main drawback. So we can say that its time to market factor is very high. Then second is your type of ASIC is your gate arrays. Gate arrays basically are based on the idea of basic cells consisting of a collection of unconnected transistors or resistors. So here you can see that in this case, designer will have these cells with him or her. By using these cells, designer has to create his or her own design. So in this case, you can say that you don't have to start from the scratch. Means your transistors are there in the form of these cells, gate arrays with you. You have to now make connection between them. So something is there with designer. So something is there in your hand, and you have to start from there. You have to take the advantage of these available cells. You are going to take these cells. You are going to make connection between these cells, and you will come up with your design. So in this case, these ASIC vendors, they prefabricate these their silicon chips containing array of these basic cells. It is just like your, you can say, CPLD. Like in CPLD, you have number of SPLDs, and you have to use those SPLDs to create your logic. Here, if you replace those SPLDs with these cells contain different transistors, resistors, and you can replace those programmable interconnects with metallization, means one time programmable, or it means those cannot be changed, those circuits. So then we can say that that will act as your these gate array ASICs. So channels are typically provided between rows and columns of these arrays for routings, just like your that CPLD. Then the vendor also provides a cell library that contains your logic gates, mux, etc. So apart from these cells, you will also have some libraries, and in those libraries you will have some modules in the form of gates, multiplexers, maybe some higher modules in the form of your adders, multipliers. So straight away you can take those modules from the libraries, and you can use those modules in your design. So in this way, by using these different cells, and you can say modules from the library, netlist is generated, and then a special mapping, placement and routing CAD tools are used to assign the logic gates to basic cells and to design the interconnect. The output of this process is photomask, and that defines the metallization layers. Since the transistors and other components are already prefabricated, so there is considerably cost saving. The main drawback here basically, if these transistors are prefabricated, then you don't need, means a very costly setup, industrial setup. So in this way, it reduces the cost, as well as it also reduces the time to market factor. You can come up with your product in a very short time, because you are not going to start from the scratch. You have something, and you have to you have some libraries with modules. You have to use these cells, and you have to use components from the libraries. You have to connect them, and you have to come up with the product. So it is less time consuming also. But the only drawback of this technology of ASIC is basically resources are underutilized. Resources are underutilized because these cells are prefabricated on silicon area. So number of cells are already available. You can't reduce them. If you are taking one die, you will have this number of cells on it. And another thing is, there is no flexibility on your routing. So your routing cannot be that much optimal as compared to your fully custom. Uh, so in this case, we can say that resource utilization is poor, and routing will not be that much optimal, that much we can achieve with the help of your fully custom. Because if you are making some design, let us say there are for example, there are 100 of cells are available with you or prefabricated on your chip for that particular chip, and out of those 100 cells, if we are using only 20 cells for our design, it means that 80 cells are wasted. So means we are not utilizing all the resources available on the area. And apart from this one, you have prefabricated interconnects. You can't make your own routing tracks, you can't make your own interconnects. You have to choose your routing or interconnect from the available in the area. So it is not optimal in the sense of area and you can say uh, this routing part. Then next is your standard cell devices. These type of ASICs were available in the early 80s to address the problems with the gate arrays. Now you know the problem with gate array. Gate array has the problem of its you can say utilize, it is underutilization, resources are underutilized, and your routing is not optimal. So similar to these gate arrays, ASIC vendors defines the cell library. The vendor supplies now in this form. In this case, what vendors were doing, they were supplying your hard macros and soft macro libraries, which include elements such as processors, some common functions related with VLSI, RAMs, ROM, etc. So here hard macro means you have means a file that has your layout that can be used for your hardware implementation, and soft macro means you have codes directly, you can use those codes in your design. So in this case uh, nothing is prefabricated. Designer will have hardcore hard macros, and then a designer can have soft macro depending upon the requirement. Designer can use them in his or her design. So nothing is prefabricated. Apart from these, designers can also have the option of purchasing blocks which are not means available in the library, and those are known as your some blocks may be purchased separately, and we have to avoid the intellectual property right. So designers generate a gate level netlist using CAD tools similar to it is similar to your gate arrays, but as I told you, none of the component is prefabricated on your now silicon area. Whatever component is required, you have to you can say implement that component either using hard macro or using soft macro on your particular area. So once you use these required hard and soft macros, the next process is now you use P and R tools. P and R here stands for your placement and routing. So once these components are present on the area, next thing is you have to place and route, and your placement and routing, it should be in such a way that you have to optimize your design in terms of area and delay. The output of the process is completely set off photomask. So once you use all these hard macros and soft macros, and then you use placement and routing, your circuit is complete, and your output of your design will be in the form of photomask. And those photomasks, or you can say layout, and that layout will be further used by the person in your CAM, computer aided manufacturing department. Then the fourth category of your ASIC is structured ASICs. Structured ASICs means they were available in early 90s. ASIC manufacturers were looking for ways to reduce ASIC design costs and development times. As I told you that if we start from our ASIC design, fully customs, they are fully you can say optimized in terms of your area, power and speed, but their main drawback is their time to market factor is very high, and their development cost was also very high. Then that is why to overcome that problem, we shifted to our gate arrays, but your gate arrays were also suffer from the problem of inefficient resource utilization, and their routing was not optimal. So then we switched to our next part, that was your standard cell devices. Standard cell devices means where we tried to overcome the problem of our this inefficient resource utilization. Now, even then, we were suffering from the problem of design cost. Design cost was very high, and no doubt development time was also very high. So there was a problem with the designers. They were supposed to come up with one solution so that we will not go back to our gate areas, we can say that, and we can create a design with less cost, and we can create a design in very less time, because this is competitive world. If you are making your chip, or you are programming your chip, you have to come up with your product in means small time. Otherwise someone else will come in the market and with same product, with same features, and some other product is launched in the market, then you will be out of that competition. If your product is coming after someone else product, you will be nowhere. So this is very important factor. And yes, you have to keep cost factor also in your mind. So designer has to face this problem. They have to come up with the product in very less time, and they have to keep the price of the product also very low. So then they shifted to this structured ASICs. Here you can see that structured ASICs, basically it is advanced, you can say, version of your gate arrays. The basic element is called a module or tile. It contains a mixture of prefabricated generic logic implemented at gates, mux, lookup tables, registers, and some local RAMs. So here we can say that in this case, in case of gate arrays, you are having only transistors and resistance for making the connection. Now, in structured ASICs, you have bigger modules. You have modules in the form of lookup tables, you have modules in the form of multiplexers, you have modules in the form of gates. Now, you have bigger modules. You can use those bigger modules, and you can come up with your design in very less time. So, it is going to be less time consuming. So, this was the advantage of your structured ASICs. So now our last part is your you can say platform is your FPGA. We have already discussed PLDs. PLDs have two further categories. One is your SPLD, another one is your CPLD. Then we discussed our ASICs. ASICs again have four major parts. One is your fully custom, then gate arrays, then standard cells, then structured ASICs, and now we are going to discuss our FPGAs. FPGAs are also, you can say, they are programmable like PLDs. We are going to discuss the need of these FPGAs in our coming slides also. Means FPGAs are also programmable, our PLDs are also programmable. Then what was the need of these FPGAs? No doubt, FPGAs were required. That is why they came into the picture, and we are going to discuss the need of these FPGAs in our later on slides. At present, we are going to discuss these FPGAs. The first FPGA was based on CMOS technology. Here again, CMOS technology is used for creating your. In case of PLDs, we were discussing CPLDs. We were discussing SPLDs. Blocks were there. So in case of FPGAs, those blocks we can replace with PLBs, or you can say CLBs. PLB here stands for your programmable logic blocks, and CLB stands for your combinational logic blocks. And the early chips used an area of, so in our FPGA you have a number of these similar PLBs or CLBs on your chip. and they may consist of 3 input lookup table or one register. We are taking one simple example of this one PLB, where you can see that this is one PLB, or sometimes you also call it as CLB. So in this CLB, you can see we have one 3 input lookup table, we have one multiplexer, we have one flip flop. This is one architecture, and this architecture is not standard. It may vary from one vendor to another vendor, and it may vary from one FPGA to another FPGA. So just I am going to give you one idea about how these CLBs or PLBs are going to work. So we are taking this example. So each PLB can have programmable connect, and FF, that is flip flop, it can be triggered by a positive or negative clock. The MUX allows selection of LUT output or external input. Now if you want to just view the working of this complete PLB, or for example, let us say you want to design this circuit. This is your logic circuit. Here you can use, we are using AND gate. This is inverter, this is OR. So basically your Boolean expression is, what is this Y here acts as output. We have 3 inputs A, B and C. So we can write this Boolean expression as Y is equal to A and B or C. So this is the Boolean expression and this is the circuit. Now I want to implement this logic circuit. So as I told you, whenever we go for VLSI design, either you can design your circuit using schematic, that is your this upper part, or you can use your this expression also if you are working in HDL. So based on this expression, now you can see we are talking about 3 input LUT. 3 input LUT is basically here 3 input, your 3 inputs are A, B and C, and based on the you can say transition of your A, B and C, you will get your output Y. So LUT, lookup table, basically works as your truth table. So based on these 3 inputs, so you are going to basically analyze all the different 3 possibilities. So 3 inputs means you can have how many possibilities? You can have 8 possibilities starting from 000 to 111, and for each and every condition, what will be the output? What will be your Y? For example, if I take this first you can say step, when all these inputs A, B and C are 000, these 3 are 0. When A is 0, B is 0, your AND gate, its output will be 0. When this C is 0, it is inverter, its output here will be 1. So here it is 0, it is 1, and this is your OR gate. OR gate means if any one of the 2 inputs are 1, then your output will be 1. So your Y is, here you can see that it is 1 here. So likewise for all the combinations from 000 to 111, we are taking all the combinations, and then we are analyzing our circuit, and based on our circuit we are getting these different outputs of Y. So now next is your LUT unit. This is your basically LUT unit, that is your 3 input LUT. In 3 input LUT, your SRAM cell, you can say just view here, these are SRAMs where your output will be stored. You are going to analyze your output with the help of this truth table, and all your outputs will be stored in these SRAMs. And depending upon your input, whether it is your 000 or it is 101, whatever input is there, you have to produce the output of your LUT. So here you can see that ABC inputs are used by the multiplexer. Depending upon this ABC, you have to select output from this SRAM cell. So let us say if this ABC is 101, 101 means here it is 0. So you will get output of your LUT as 0. So in this way, you're this lookup table based. You can say PLBs and CLBs work. You use this multiplexer. This multiplexer is going to select. It is going to take your input. Based on those input, you have to provide some output, and those outputs are going to be stored in your SRAM cell already, and you are going to provide that output on your Y, and that is the output of your LUT. So likewise, these PLBs, this is one example of PLB. No doubt, if you are going for higher FPGAs with more number of resources, this PLB or CLB may be more complex. I am just here giving you this simple example just to give you the idea so that you can easily understand the concept of your LUT based CLBs. So likewise, you will have a number of PLBs here. Here you can see that number of PLBs and with programmable interconnects in between these PLBs. So you can see that structure of this one is similar to your PLD, but or CPLD. In CPLD, you have these simple programmable logic blocks, but in your this case, you have these PLBs, or you can say CLB blocks. So the FPGA architecture, basically it is two-dimensional, and all these PLBs are separated by a C of programmable interconnects, and these programmable interconnects they may be SRAM based programmable interconnects. Today's FPGAs are much more complex. For example, in addition to local interconnects, an FPGA typically has global interconnect network. Global interconnect network, this basically allows signal to cross the chip without having to pass through the local switching elements. So as I told you in our earlier slides, that in CPLD, whenever you have to make connection between your external channel with more number of wires with the internal channel with less number of wires, you need one switching matrix. That switching matrix consists of what? That switching matrix consists of your multiplexer. So that multiplexer plays the role of that programmable interconnection. It connects one of the programmable interconnect from your external channel with programmable interconnect of your internal channel. But those are basically interconnects based on those switching matrix. Apart from these interconnects, FPGAs also have some global interconnects, and those kind of interconnects, they don't need those switching matrices. Those type of interconnects are direct, and they can be used externally. Example of those type of interconnects are global clocks. If you want to circulate clock all over the circuit, then that is one example of your high speed, you can say, global interconnection. So whenever you are going to work in FPGAs, you will sometimes you will get in your synthesis part GCLK, that is your global clock. This allows signals to cross the chip without having to pass through these logic switching elements. And then another option is FPGA and ASIC hybrids. Sometimes FPGAs are also used with ASICs. For example, as I told you that ASICs are time consuming, ASICs are very optimal in all the desired fields, but we go for ASIC design when they are required in bulk. If we want only 2 or 3 or let us say 10, 20 chips, then ASICs are not advisable. ASICs are required where mass production is required. You have to create that particular chip in lakhs, or you can say more than lakhs number. So likewise, if you have one ASIC, for example, that ASIC is for one signal processing task, you have created one ASIC for signal processing task, and that ASIC is used for, you can say, filtering. Later on, if you want to enhance or you want to modify your some of the parameters of that filtering, one ASIC is there that supports one filter also, and that filter was made for some particular application, but after maybe 2 or you can say 3 years, we found that now we need some, we have to add something in it, we have to change some specifications of our filter. So in that case, you can't modify your ASIC, because your ASIC is it cannot be reprogrammed. If ASIC developed for one particular application, it will work for that application only. You can't modify it. But later on, if you want to modify it after maybe 1 or 2 years for some small function for that particular filter, if you are not able to perform that modification, it means that your that ASIC is basically waste. If lakhs of those ASICs are there with you, it means that all those ASICs are waste, and this is wastage of your whole money. So to overcome that problem, we make a hybrid. We combine our this ASIC with FPGA, and whatever modification is required, if you want to modify that filter, we can implement that filter, we can modify that filter, and we can implement that filter on FPGA. So that modification can be done on FPGA. So whenever filtering is required, that particular filtering, that will be done with the help of FPGA, and rest of the part it will be performed with the help of ASICs. So in this case, that we can say that there is no need to replace the ASICs. We can use FPGAs, and we can save our cost in such a way. So in this way, we can have these hybrids. We can have combination of ASICs and FPGAs if it is required. So although it doesn't make sense to embed an ASIC into FPGA, but it is meaningful in other direction, embedded FPGA cores. So this is useful for platform design, a term used at the board level to refer to design for which multiple products can be derived. Here the platform is the ASIC, and the embedded FPGA allows it to be customized for specific application. So here you can see that this is one example. Here the designer of ASIC offloads to the FPGA any part of your ASIC design. As I told you, this is the ASIC, this is your FPGA. If this ASIC filter design need to be modified, as this thing is not possible in ASIC, that part will be offloaded from this ASIC, and it will be implemented on this FPGA with modified specifications. So, and that filtering part will be performed with the help of FPGA with latest you can say changes and modifications. Rest of the part will be performed with the help of this ASIC only. So here the designers of the ASIC offloads the required part of your wherever you need any modification, and it can be implemented on FPGA. Board level realization occurs a performance penalty because of signals must travel off chip. If we want to perform the same thing on board level, so the drawback of this thing will be your performance will degrade. So embedding FPGA is better solution for that particular situation. Now, as I told you that we are going to discuss all these three different platforms, and we are going to compare them in detail. I think now from this complete detailed discussion, many of you will be very well aware of the thing. They means what is the difference between these three different platforms. Now we are going to further. We are going to compare these platforms. First of all, if we compare this PID with ASIC, so PID, advantage of PID is it is programmable. We can program our PID, and the disadvantage of this PID is it has very limited number of resources in it, and it is normally suitable for simple kind of logic. So advantage is PID is reprogrammable. Disadvantage is it is suitable for only simple kind of logics, and you can say because of a limited number of resources on these PIDs. In case of CPID, you can go for some complex logics also, but again limitation of your resources will be there. So a number of resources are less in case of your PIDs. On the other hand, if we talk about these ASICs are basically they provide optimality in all the you can say desired requirements. They are basically compact in size. We can use the required number of transistors, right? So they are basically area will be less, power will be less consumed, and their speed will be high, because we are going to create each and everything on our own. However, the disadvantage of ASICs is, as I already told you, that they are very time consuming, and the design is frozen in silicon. It required, so whenever means it is not reprogrammable. On other side, we can say that the disadvantage of your ASIC is it is time consuming. Its time to market factor is very high, and another disadvantage, it is not reprogrammable. Your circuit programmed once, it will remain there and you can't change it. So as I told you that whenever you want to do any modification, either you have to do those modification off chip, or you have to do those modification by hybridizing these FPGAs with your ASICs. Now just compare these PLDs and ASICs. PLD is programmable, but it has limited number of resources. FPGAs, they have unlimited number of resources, means you can use the number of resources, whatever number you want, you can use those resources, but they are not you can say reprogrammable. So there may be requirement where we need reprogrammability, and we have to make our system with more number of resources. So in that case, basically here there is a gap between your PLD and FPGAs. If we use PLDs, they can be reconfigured, but they are not suitable for larger logics. If I want to make some large logic, we want to design some system, these are not suitable. ASICs, if I use ASICs, they are time consuming. They can make those large logics, but they are not suitable because they are not reprogrammable, and they are very time consuming. So I need one platform that is reprogrammable, and that can implement larger logics also, means they can be used for system designs also. So that is why FPGAs came into the picture. FPGAs are you can say they are suitable. They basically bridge the gap between your PLDs and ASICs. They are reprogrammable, and you have number of resources on your FPGAs. You can opt for any FPGA depending upon the requirement, and different FPGAs are there. If you know the requirement of your resources, you can select your FPGA. So another thing is, you should have very good you can say knowledge of your this thing. It means which FPGA you have with you, and what logic you have to implement on that particular FPGA. So whether your FPGA is going to support that particular logic, whether the resources available on your FPGAs, those are sufficient for implementing that particular design. So all those things you have to take care, and based on that you have to select the FPGA. So here now we can say that Xilinx developed first FPGA in '84, and this is called a new class of IC, and FPGAs came into the picture to fill the gap between your PLDs and ASICs. So here you can see that PLDs are there. PLDs have two type of PLDs are there, SPLDs and CPLDs. Then you have ASICs. Again, in ASICs you have four different categories. Depending upon your requirement, you can opt for any one of these four categories, but still there was a gap between this PLD and ASIC, and that gap we have to fill, and that gap was filled with the help of these FPGAs. So that is why at present these days FPGAs are very basically popular in your system design, where continuous changes are required, where you have to modify your circuit very regularly, at that point of time these FPGAs plays very important role. So FPGAs, if we compare these FPGAs with ASICs, the cost of an FPGA is much lower than that of ASIC, because your ASICs need a very costly setup. It is not available everywhere. Here in Chandigarh, only SCL Mohali, they have this ASIC setup, and they are basically fabricating some chips. So for those kind of you can say setups, initial cost is very high. You may need more than 500 crores of money for initial setup of those units. So we can say that its initial setup is very high, ASICs. Whereas FPGAs are very you can say freely available in the market. You can use those FPGAs and you can program those FPGAs at your end only in your labs, and it can be programmed at our end. We can easily program our FPGA in our labs. This is the advantage, and we can use it for, you can say, prototyping. And the other thing basically is FPGAs are reprogrammable. We can change our design, and time to market factor is shorter in this case of FPGAs. So if we compare these, no doubt ASICs have their own advantages, and they cannot be replaced at some places. But wherever modification, or you know that in future modifications are required, it is always preferred to use FPGAs. FPGAs are reprogrammable, and if you have to come up with the design in a very short time, its time to market factor is also very less. So FPGAs are advantages at these you can say applications. Whereas your ASICs, they are more advantageous, where you have to optimize in all sense in your power, area, and speed. So they are more and another advantage of FPGA here is efficient utilization of your resources. The drawback of your FPGA is again same, inefficient resource utilization, because in FPGAs you may have number of PLBs, you have number of CLBs. Let us say it is there are 500 CLBs on one FPGA, and out of those CLBs you are using only 10. So from here now you can see that area utilization is not efficient in case of FPGAs. But no doubt both FPGAs and ASICs, they have their own advantages, they have their own disadvantages. Depending upon the application, depending upon the designer requirement, we can select one platform, and selection of this platform, no doubt it will depend upon your CAD tool available with the designer and platform available with the designer. If you have FPGAs with you, only then you can work in this area. So these days FPGAs basically are used for prototyping, as I told you. In case of ASICs also, we use these FPGAs for prototype purpose. So whenever, as I told you, whenever we go for any electronic design, we first design our circuit on breadboards, and then on those we check the circuit. But in case of ASIC design also, we have to check our circuit at some platform. So for that particular purpose, we check the functionality of our ASIC on FPGA. So whenever we go for ASIC design, first prototype normally we design on our FPGAs. We check our prototype, and then we proceed further for our ASIC design if its functionality is as per our requirement. Then FPGAs at present, they are widely used in your DSP, digital signal processing, and as you know, signal processing is used at present everywhere. It is used in video processing, audio processing, image processing is there, medical imaging is there, in communication, wireless communication, everywhere you will see that DSP is there. So You can use FPGAs in any one of these fields. Then we can use for embedded systems also. We can perform embedded system design by using embedded microcontrollers in FPGAs. Then these are used for communication and also suitable for your reconfigurable computing. So this is all about these three different domains: PLDs, ASICs, and FPGAs. So after this one, we are going to conclude our session. So our conclusion is PLDs can be used to develop simple and complex logics. As two categories are there, SPLD and CPLD. They are reconfigurable, so wherever modifications are required, you can go for PLDs. But they are used for small logics only because of the limited number of resources on PLDs. FPGAs further can be used for programmable environments where modifications are required, and they are flexible. They have enhanced flexibility, and their advantages, their time to market factor is very less. And then third part is ASIC, and ASICs can be used where you have to optimize your design in all areas like speed and delay. You have to reduce the area, you have to enhance the utilization of your resources. So depending upon your you can say input, depending upon your tools available with you, depending upon your hardware platform available with you, you can use any one of these platforms, and then you can proceed with your design. So this is all about this complete session about your PLDs, ASICs, and FPGAs. Now, references, you can have more idea about these different topics from this one book is there from Wolf. It is by Pearson Education, and the name of this book is FPGA based system design. Another book is there by Wolf again, that is your modern VLSI design, and its third edition. Again, it is by Pearson Education. And then you have user manual by Xilinx ISE. And I will suggest all of you that whenever you go for any kind of software exposure, never forget their user manuals. Those user manuals are very useful, whether you are working in front-end VLSI design, whether you are working in back-end VLSI design, whatever tool you are using, try to grab knowledge from their user manuals, because they are the best friend for you to understand that particular you can say software, and to understand that complete tool. So that's all about this complete session. Now I welcome you all for query. So if you have any query, please go ahead with your questions. So any center has any query? So we are waiting for queries from your end. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me, sir? So this is Shilpa from SRMS CET Bareilly.
Shilpa from?
SRMS CET Bareilly.
Yes, Shilpa. Yeah, please go
Sir,
ahead.
sir, I have one question that like if for FPGA designing, we are having many tools like ISC, Xilinx, Model Sim, etc. But for ASIC designing, what kind of CAD tools are used?
Uh, okay, Xilinx ISE is already available with you.
Yes, sir, we are having that.
Right.
But
For
sir,
ASIC design, you have different, so many tools are there in the market. You have Microwind. Today, after afternoon session, it is based on your Microwind software only, and a person from industry, they are going to come here, and they are going to give you the exposure about this DSCH and Microwind software. So you can use this DSCH and Micro software for your backend VLSI design, and their educational versions are also available on the site. You can download those versions and you can start your work on those softwares. So
Okay, sir.
Microwind is one, Tanner tool is there. These are you can say slightly less costly softwares. Apart from these two softwares, you have Virtuoso by Cadence, you have Synopsys, you have complete EDA tool by Mentor Graphics. So number of tools are there. It depends upon you, whatever tool you have. If you don't have any tool, even then you can download their evaluation versions from the site. You can work on those tools, and from you can say understanding point of view, that is also sufficient. So today after lunch session you are going to get exposure about this DSCH and Microwind. I suggest all of you to kindly download evaluation version of these two softwares so that you can softwares in future also. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Sir, one more thing I want to know that FPGAs are matlab, very much required in the current scenario. So, sir, I just want to know that what are the requirements for the lab setup of FPGA at the college level?
Actually, it is not very costly affair. You can, I mean, ISC software is already available with you,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And you have to buy some kits, FPGA kits, and Xilinx. They are providing those FPGA kits. You can have those kits from dealers. You can have kits from Xilinx site also. And cost of those kits, it starts from 8 to 10,000. You can start with one simple kit, Spartan 3E, right, with
Sir.
maybe 500K gates, and uh, 3 or 4 years back, cost of that kit was around 10,000. Maybe at present it may be less than that. So cost is not very high. You can have at least 1 or 2 kits in your department. You can ISC is already there with you. You can use ISC with those kits, and you can have a very good exposure of
Okay.
FPGAs.
This pattern 3 is one of them, one of the kits.
Spartan 3 there, Vertex is there, and so many different categories are there for Spartan and Vertex. So depending upon your, I'm just talking about these lower end
Okay.
FPGAs so that you can start. Later on, once you are comfortable with these FPGAs, you can shift to higher ones also. But to start with your work on FPGAs, I think it is more than sufficient. You can go ahead with these Spartan 3E kits.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Any other query from any other center?
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, sir. This is Mithun Kumar sir from SMIT, Barampur.
From Behrampur.
Yes, sir.
Acha,
SMIT.
okay. Right.
Yes,
Yep.
where we are requiring also complex logic circuits, and
Yes.
also there is a speed is a main factor. So in that case also can we choose the FPGA?
Actually, your voice is not clear. Can you repeat your question? Please repeat your question.
Sir, sir, when suppose we have to design complex logic circuits,
You want to design
is it audible, sir?
audible, but somewhere your voice is basically disconnecting. So that is why some problem is coming. Yeah.
Suppose we have to design complex logic circuits.
Complex logic circuits.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Where the speed is also playing an important role. Where
What is
this
what is playing important role?
speed.
Speed.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes. Speed is always important. Whenever we talk about VLSI design, whenever you are going for a research in the area of VLSI design, and whenever you are going to search for IEEE papers based on VLSI, you will find that your papers will be either researchers, they are working on area, they are going to reduce the area, or they are going to enhance the speed, because these two things are basically you can say, if you are going to enhance the speed, it will be at the cost of what? It will be at the cost of sometimes area, because you introduce parallelism in your circuit. you go from serial execution to parallel execution. So you consume more area and you provide higher speed, but you have to provide best solution between your speed and area, right? So whenever we go for VLSI design, we consider all the three parameters. We have to optimize our design in area, speed, and your power consumption, right? So if you are enhancing the speed and you are taking too much area as compared to existing design, again that is of no use. You have to take care of that area consumption also. So whether you are going for complex logic, whether you are going for simple, whether you are using FPGAs, these three concepts will remain there in your mind, and you have to come up with one design that will be optimal in all sense, right?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is any other query from other centers? So no query from any other center. So right, I end up this session here. So really thankful to all of my participants for being patient and for listening to this talk. Now we will have a break of 20 minutes. You can have tea, and then we will start our next session, that is on VHDL. So I have given you exposure about this, you can say, different platforms, your PLDs, your FPGAs and ASICs. Now our next speaker, she is to give you exposure about VHDL. That is one part of your HDL language. Normally we use this VHDL language to program these CPLDs and FPGAs. So you have the idea of these hardware platforms. Our next speaker is going to give you the exposure of VHDL, and that language you can use for programming of these FPGA. And after lunch session, basically this part is for your VHDL. You can say that it is meant for your front end VLSI design. After lunch session, we are going to take up with our software, and we will discuss our backend issues, and we will discuss our backend design. So I request you all to kindly enjoy your tea, and we will start our new session at 11:30. Thank you very much.